All right, we see that. Good evening, everyone. We'll tell the ticker annual Martin Luther King evening discussion. And this evening, we're so fortunate to be joined by an SCH parent, Councilwoman Cherelle Parker. And Councilwoman Parker and I were chatting before we came online tonight. And she is in City Council, or actually she started her career. When she was 17 years old, she interned in City Council. And then about a decade after that, she got kicked out of the nest and had to go all the way west to Harrisburg. And I said to her, I understand it's a long ways for Philadelphia. But Cherelle said that was one of the best things that ever happened to her, because she realized that the importance of relationships that she learned in City Council scaled to statewide. And then she returned to City Council and relies on so many of those relationships today. Cherelle is also a proud parent at SCH. Her son Langston, I'm not even sure what grade Langston's in anymore. I've been shaking Langston's hand since he was in pre-K. He's in 3rd grade. And Langston is always out every morning, gets to say hi to Langston and see Cherelle on the drop-off. This lecture is brought to us as a collaboration of the Diversity Resource Network of the Parent Association, led by Will Dunbar, and our DEI team, led by Raina Guy. So without further ado, I want to welcome Councilwoman Parker, who's going to share with us her thoughts on Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy to the country and what it means to us here in Philadelphia. Cherelle, over to you.
Let me start by saying thank you so very much to you, Will, and good evening to Dr. Drugan and the SCH family and all of our friends. It is my honor to join you tonight in celebration of the legacy of the trailblazing and trend-setting Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Some of you on today may have volunteered at service projects despite the weather we had last night and early this morning. And as a servant leader, I want you to know that I thank you for your service, and I thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. Gotta give a big shout out to Dr. Drugan. Doc, even as people were coming into the room, you were doing what I have watched you do magically since Langston joined the SCH family. How you remember the names of every student, what they do, what their interests are, and still remember the parents and their names. I'll never get it, but I want you to know I'm going to work on practicing that skill set. Also want to say a special thank you to Rain, our Director of Diversity and Inclusion, to Faye Dunbar, our president of our Parents Association, and to my fellow Lion, my fellow Lincoln alum, Will Dunbar. As someone who has planned numerous events, I understand what it takes to cross the T's and to dot the I's. And in these complicated times, it's a little more difficult, and it takes just a little bit more precision to coordinate virtual events. So I want to say thank you to the entire team for coordinating tonight. Now, I know some folks say that elected officials are usually long-winded, and trust me, some of us really are, but I promise that I am not going to keep you too long. On February 4th, 1968, before a crowd of men, women, children, supporters, and freedom fighters, literally 60 days before his assassination, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered a sermon. Now, before I tell you the title of the sermon, I want you to know it is obviously not the speech, the game-changing I Have a Dream speech that he gave in Washington, D.C. But I am sharing a Cherelle Parker secret with the SCH family this evening, and that is, this is the speech that I make sure I read at least once a month. This is the speech and or sermon that helps to ensure that I stay grounded in my work and not forget the purpose of why it is that I do what I do. That sermon and or speech is titled The Drum Major Instinct, and he gave it at his Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, and you know that was the church where he co-pastored. Now, if you research this speech, some scholars will tell you that the speech seemed kind of eerie. Some say like Dr. King was self-eulogizing, as he does in this speech. He clearly articulates how he wanted his eulogy to be read when the time came. But this is my favorite sermon, my favorite speech of Dr. King's. And please, I encourage each of you to read it. And to me, reading it is good, but until you have an opportunity to listen to him deliver it, it really doesn't have the same feel. Now, as most reverends in Baptist churches do, and I'm Baptist, he opened the sermon by reading the related scripture from the Bible, and then he sets to deliver one of the most powerful presentations about this thing called the drum major instinct. Now, I join you this evening to talk about three things. First, what is the drum major instinct? Second, how does one misuse this gift? And three, how can we all be agents of change when we properly use our drum major instinct? First, what is the drum major instinct? Let's start from the beginning. If you don't know what a drum major is, this is the person who generally leads the marching band. As you heard me mention, I'm a proud graduate of the first historically Black degree granting institution of higher learning in the nation, Will Dunbar and I, the Lincoln University in Oxford, Pennsylvania. And marching bands are extremely important to that HBCU experience. And it's a very, very proud role to serve as the drum major. They are usually in a uniform, custom design outfit, fit the role of a leader, and they're usually holding a stylized mace. Some may refer to it as a baton, with a whistle on a lanyard, and it's around their neck. But they are the first person you see as the band approaches during the parade, or the first person you see rise from the front of the bleachers as the band prepares to stand and perform. The drum major is the leader who wants to be seen. I'm going somewhere. The drum major is the leader who wants to be seen. The leader who is motivated by the attention and revels in the distinction that is afforded with this title. Now, before this person ever, donned the title of drum major, they have this feeling in their gut that it is their calling. We refer to this as the instinct. They have this instinct that in front of the band is where they are destined to be. Now, according to Dr. King, and he talks about this in the sermon, several psychologists, and I can remember one, I think he said it was Alfred Adler, said that each of us as human beings, we have a little drum major instinct roaming in our bodies. Now, don't think that this drum major instinct is bad. Now, Dr. King defines the drum major instinct as the desire to be important, to surpass others, to achieve distinction, in essence, to do what the drum major does, lead the parade, the desire to do good and to be praised for doing it good. Whatever it is, Cherelle, I did it extremely well. The drum major instinct. Now, before you all begin saying to yourselves, well, what is Cherelle Parker talking about? I don't think it's kind, to desire to be good and want to be praised for doing good. But Dr. King so aptly teaches us that none of us are exempt from this feeling, but it shows up in different ways. But we all have some of this drum major instinct, in essence, rumbling inside of us. And we all must come to accept that we have this instinct. It is a human instinct. The challenge, which is so powerful, is ours. And the challenge is ours to control how to take it and shape it and learn how to use it. Second thing we want to talk about is, how does one misuse this instinct? Well, I wish I could say it's hard, but unfortunately it is not. We live in a world where everyone wants to be seen. I mean, think of social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, rather for fun or applause, but we've become enthralled with the desire for human attention. And you heard me mention the Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and or the new one I'm learning, Snapchat. We want to be noticed. There is this desire for recognition. We want people to hit the like button or the heart button or give the thumbs up on our pages. I recently saw an ad for a show called The Next Influencer. Now, full disclosure, I've never watched the show, but apparently it's like on its third season. But the ad just so happened to appear as I was preparing for this presentation. And it made me wonder, what makes the people selected for this show qualified to influence? Who are they influencing? What are they influencing the viewers to do? We misuse this gift, this instinct, when we have no clear vision of who we are influencing and why. We misuse this instinct when we are using it for self-gratification only, to satisfy this misplaced need for someone to give us a like or a thumbs up simply because we did something. So in essence, we become distracted by the lack of purpose that we don't realize, what or who we are becoming, or the negative impact of operating without regard for the people we are influencing. We mistakenly create, in my mind, what I view as this impenetrable lens of separation, causing a great divide, perpetuating systems of like hierarchies and classes that in essence fuel injustices and miseducation that have really lingered for far too long. When we misuse this instinct, this drum major instinct, we waste time focused on self instead of what is important aside from our individual selves, and that is community, on individualism instead of togetherness, on what we would call and Dr. King calls keeping up with the Joneses instead of living with purpose. And each time we decide to use this gift to only serve ourselves, we regress as a society instead of progressing together as a people. Let me quickly just say to you that when we fail to harness this instinct, we prepare it, if we fail, we will be using it only for our personal self-gratification, and that doesn't do the drum major instinct any good. It's not good. It doesn't do it it doesn't do it or give it any value when we're talking about moving it forward. What we have to do is prepare it and learn how to use it for the greater good. If we don't, we run the risk of causing more danger than we actually imagine. The third thing, now, Cherelle, wait a minute. We heard about this instinct. Tell us, how can we use our own individual drum major instinct to be agents of change and to move forward with progress? Well, I would like to tell you that this is easy, but it isn't. It isn't hard, but it in essence isn't easy. Takes three things that are extremely important to me and tools that I know I've employed the use of in my life. One, dedication. Two, tenacity, and three, I'm a Philadelphia native, that's grit. That grit becomes extremely important. What do we need to do to become change agents? First, we have to believe that things can change for the better. And when we can find that hope inside of us, we must hold on to it tight, because there are moments when it is the only thing that we will have to hold on to. I attended the funeral service this morning. I started my day at the Leah Core Center for those victims of the tragic Fairmount Avenue fire. And to see all of those small caskets and all of the family and all of the community in Philadelphia there attempting to support those who had been impacted by what I view as one of the most unimaginable tragedies that we've ever experienced in our city. It affirms for me that sometimes hope is the only thing that we have to hold on to. And it becomes extremely important when we are trying to overcome what appears to be insurmountable. The next thing that I want us to keep in mind is that we have to decide where we are going to serve. When Dr. King prepared to close this sermon, he began to note how he wanted to be remembered. He said, "Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize." I'd like somebody to mention that day, the day his eulogy is given, that Martin Luther King Jr. tired in his life and tried in his life to give his life serving others, that he did try to feed the hungry, that he did try in his life to clothe those who were naked, and that he did try to love and serve humanity. SCH and our family, we already know how to do this well. Our boys and our girls, they learn this beginning in pre-K on the importance of giving back, and our partnerships with nonprofits and religious institutions and community-based organizations in our region that we work to try to support and to teach the students that they, in essence, have to make this a part of their foundation. So thanks to the teachers in the SCH family, we are already teaching this and using this as a part of the foundation for the outstanding education that is provided there. For those of you who decide to take this step towards service, you must do so for all of humanity, regardless of their ethnicity and/or zip code. Service is not to be exclusive. Service does not come with a fee. Service is free. It is genuine. It is authentic, and it has to be done without prejudice and/or bias. It is just based on being authentic. And if it's not, believe me when I tell you, the very community and/or constituency that we think we're serving, if we're not authentic in our efforts, they'll be able to see it a mile away. Now, after you decide to serve, I urge you to find an issue that interests you. We are battling so many challenges as a nation. I'm talking about from equity, economic equity, from climate change to food insecurity and housing insecurity. And the organizations that are on the front of these issues, they would greatly appreciate having more hands in the pot to fight, to advocate, and to march. The more hands, the better the chances of us achieving greater heights. So when you get in the room, now this is something that is extremely important to me, SCH. As an elected official, I watch people sometimes come up with solutions for constituencies that they know nothing about. They haven't taken the time to get to know, but they read a white paper about an issue. And they said, this is a good response. This is a great solution to that problem. But they've never taken the time to get to know or listen to the very people, the very constituency that they have decided that they wanted to serve. So when you, SCH family, get in the room, be prepared to listen to the people who are impacted by the very issue that you're trying to help to solve. Many times than not, those people, they have the solutions. They're not looking for superheroes to swoop down and to save them. They are looking for people to listen, to support, and to fight right alongside them. They are looking for true allies and not saviors. Cherelle Parker, thinking about Dr. King, what comes to mind? I don't have it to share on my screen with you today, but another thing, after you listen to Dr. King give this drum major instinct sermon and or you read it, promise me that you'll take a look at that historic photo where you'll see Dr. King and his wife, Coretta Scott King, and Ralph Abernathy, but you're going to also see Rabbi Heschel standing right by him. You're also going to see a Catholic priest standing right by him, and those who are, behind them marching, and even on the front lines, they are Black, they are white, they are Muslim, they are Christian, they are Jewish, they are Catholic, but they are all working together towards a greater goal. But it's clear about who is leading the effort, and that is the people who are closest to the pain. This was one of the greatest tools. Doc, you mentioned my experience as a state legislator in Harrisburg, and coming from the great city of Philadelphia. Believe me when I tell you, it was some eye openers, because I had to get to know not just this city that I lived in, but if I wanted to be a successful leader for the city of Philadelphia, I had to learn about the needs of rural Pennsylvania. I had to take the time to.
Keep going, Cheryl. We hear you fine.
Oh, you can't hear me. Okay, it just said the audio went out.
You're still there.
I had to take the time to learn about rural Pennsylvania. I had to get to know suburban Pennsylvania a little bit more than I knew it if I wanted to form the alliances with my colleagues, both Democrat and Republican, who represented those rural communities that I hadn't spent a lot of time in throughout my life, except during my undergraduate experience at Lincoln University, getting to know Oxford, Pennsylvania, and Chester County. But I will tell you that learning to listen to the people whose thoughts are different from yours, people who don't necessarily see the world through the same lens that you see it through, and they have their own thoughts and ideas about how problems should be solved. We should take the time to listen to people, and those people who are closest to the pain and the challenges that we are seeking to address. So in closing, I want to encourage you to listen to the drum major instinct, but you have to promise you can't tell any of my political opponents what strengthens me and helps to give me my resolve when I'm fighting passionately for issues that we're working on in the City Council of Philadelphia. Don't give away the secret. This is supposed to stay with the SCH family. But listen to it to honor Dr. King's legacy by getting to know what your own drum major instinct is, and use it to become an agent of change and use it to serve. I, Cherelle Parker, I am a drum major. I am a drum major working to close the gap between the haves and the have-nots. I am a drum major marching to close the digital divide. I am a drum major fighting to fund equitable employment opportunities that will put people on a path to self-sufficiency so they don't have to rely on government for anything. We want them to have dignity, and nothing provides dignity more than access to equitable employment opportunities. I am a drum major pushing to secure funding for community-based organizations that are serving young people who come from very humble beginnings like I do, raised by a single or born to a single teenage mother, father not in my life, raised by my grandparents. My grandfather was a Navy veteran. My grandmother was a domestic worker, but I could become a drum major because they worked hard to give me the best they could with what little they have. I am a drum major working for the people of the city of Philadelphia that I love so very much. And I want you, SCH family, no matter who you are, how old you are, to think about what you will do in your drum major status. Thank you all for this opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to our Q&A. I hope I haven't put you all asleep.
Cherelle, thank you so much. Before Will takes over with the Q&A, I just really want to, the words you shared about listening and getting to know the other perspective and getting to know what people need before making assumptions. Those are conversations I try to have every day in the hallways of the school. And the things you listed that you're fighting for the city of Philadelphia, those are the same things that, as I shared with you before we came on, I was in Warren County this morning visiting my parents with 14 inches of snow, but the same things you're fighting for in Philadelphia, that's what the underemployed in the part of the state where the mills are gone are looking for. And they want help, but we need to find out what they need. And they don't want government handouts. They want to be able to employ and get their own money. So thank you, Cherelle, for sharing the importance of listening. I'll turn it over to Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Steve. So Cherelle, Councilwoman Parker, we have a few questions that we have received that we will go through now. So the first question is, in today's society, is the use of protests as relevant as it was in the 1960s when the civil rights movement was at its heights?
Well, I will say to you, yes. I think any opportunity to protest injustice is relevant, regardless of the decade. For the first time in our history, our nation experienced protests in every state in 2020. Yeah, I'm thinking about the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, and it sparked hundreds of protests. And at least one can be traced back to like every state in our nation, and that is historic for the United States. However, with protests, we must have a plan that prioritizes voter registration and turnout and policies and a legislative agenda. We don't hear about that as often as we should. But the protest that was in Ferguson, Missouri, after the fatal shooting of Michael Brown in 2014, guess what? It led to institutional, legislative, and representative change. And that's the model. So yes, protests, but know specifically what you want to change and have a list that includes very representative and legislative solutions and corrections so that you can quantifiably measure the outcome of your sort of civil disobedience and or protest. In addition to that, you heard me, and Doc, thank you for mentioning that when we're protesting, we have to make sure that we are really listening. I'm gonna give you an example. As a result of all of this, there was a major chant and a message coming out of protests in the city of Philadelphia, calling for us to defund the police. Defunding the police after all of this was happening across the nation. And guess what? That is not what people in neighborhoods that are being impacted by this overwhelming amount of gun violence, they're not saying, Cherelle Parker, 9th District Council person, majority leader of the city council, defund the police. No, they're saying, Cherelle Parker, where is our community policing? If our lives matter, where the beat officers, where the bike patrol? So I'm hearing that from the people who, you heard me say earlier, the people closest to the pain. So from the people who live in the neighborhoods where all of this is occurring, they're saying we deserve supports. No, we don't want any law enforcement misusing and or abusing their authority. We want fairness. However, we want to be protected as well. But I heard a lot of noise. I won't say voices. I say a noise coming from other constituencies calling for something that the people in neighborhoods weren't really asking for. And so I think I just saw my sister Renee Chenault Fattah on, who is in her work at the front of criminal justice reform and helping men and women as they attempt to re-enter our community. She's doing solid work, but you have to make sure that the message coming from the protest, make sure it's really coming from the people who are being impacted and not noise from a loud constituency that read a white paper with very good intentions, but they missed the most important step, and that is talking to the people who are impacted. That was personal for me. You hit me with one because I'm impacted by that on a daily basis, and that it's we have to stand up.
No, that was excellent, and you gave us some excellent points, not only in your response then, but also during your keynote address, really to this second question. But it was I'll kind of ask it again so we can kind of highlight those points. What 3 things would you suggest that our students could implement in their everyday lives to embody the spirit of Dr. King's dream?
I'll say 3 things. And I'm thinking about a dynamic sister in the city of Philadelphia. She is a family counselor. Now I'm elected to public office, but I want the SCH family to know that when I went to Lincoln University, my undergraduate degree is in English education. I am a certified secondary English teacher by profession. I taught high school English grades 9 through 12, and I taught English as a second language to immigrant children and adults. However, even as an English education major and a former English educator, I had never had anyone call me something that I didn't tell them when they said this about me, but after they said it, I had to go and Google it. I was talking to a dynamic sister by the name of Farida Boyer, and she is a counselor. We were meeting about the need for more social workers of color, more Black and brown social workers in the city of Philadelphia. And she was telling me about what strategies local government should employ to make some changes. And I took notes. And probably about 6 months later, we were able to get a few things done. And she gave me the greatest compliment ever. She said, "Cherelle, you're an active listener." I thought to myself, well, thank you so very much. I didn't know what in the world an active listener meant, so I had to go Google it. So the first thing I would say after I learned what it was, SCH family, let's teach our boys and girls, and let's let all members of our family know it's important to be active listeners. It's not enough to just sit in front of someone and hear what they are saying, like Langston does me sometimes. It's not enough to also listen to the speech or hear the message. You must listen to the message in their words. I'm a communicative person, so if you're ever communicating with me, my colleagues in Harrisburg, they would always say, "Cherelle, we have to read your body language," right? So I speak, and I communicate verbally, but you have to read my body language so that you can understand what a person's purpose is. Listen to the experiences of other people. I was so happy Dr. Drugan talked about growing up in Warren. Why was that important? And to note that they have the challenges that are similar to what we are experiencing in the city of Philadelphia. And the views may even be similar, but the lens through which they view it may be a little different. We have to listen to people to understand why their views their worldviews are different from ours. Remember that we're all servants. That's the second thing I would say. Shirley Chisholm, one of my favorites of all time, she said, "Service is the rent we pay for our room on earth." And for a person like me, who benefited so much from a village, a community of teachers who touched me, little league, cheerleading coaches, track coaches, the church, so many people in the community who put their hands on me, who weren't a part of my biological family. I ask us to remember that we are all servants. And the next thing I would say, Will, is get involved. As an elected official, I will tell you, and remember this for me, I see people quite often who become what we call expert AOPs. expert AOPs. They are expert articulators of the problem. They can tell you the problem 1,001 ways, using 1,001 different languages. But we have to do what late President Roosevelt talked about. He said, he talked about getting in the arena. Getting in the arena means rolling up your sleeves. You get marred by it. The solutions you may proffer, they may never be enough because the challenges seem so insurmountable. But, if you're talking about poverty, eradicating poverty in the city of Philadelphia, the poorest, largest big city in the United States, improving the quality of public education, neighborhood stability, these problems seem so intractable, but don't just become an expert articulator of what the problem is. Figure out how you can use whatever aspect of your drum major that you can to get in the arena and try to solve some of those problems. So get engaged, get engaged.
Excellent, excellent. Next question is, how has the civil rights movement and Dr. King's work influenced the work that you do on behalf of the citizens of Philadelphia?
A great deal, Will. You heard me mention in my comments that I am a drum major working to close the gap between the haves and the have-nots. But that's not just because I've read a white paper, right? After Lincoln, I had the great honor and privilege of being able to become a member of also the University of Pennsylvania's family. I'm a graduate of the Fels Institute of Government. And I will tell you, with the tools that I gained from Fels, fellowship with Eisenhower Fellowship, with the ACY PL, that idea that we literally can close the gap between the haves and the have-nots, as long as we employ the use of tools that will allow us to sort of chisel away. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. I'm an English major. So for those of you who are on, all of the English teachers, you all know that that's Langston Hughes's poem, Mother to Son, and that's Langston's namesake. That's extremely important to me because my grandparents worked very hard to give me what little they could with the help of my village. And so I, Cherelle Parker, a young woman who came from very humble beginnings, was able to go from Penfield Street to Lincoln University to the Ivy League. And I'm a product of a single teenage mother whose father wasn't present in her life. I have to use my story and my experience as a vehicle to motivate, inspire, and encourage others that they can have hope that they too can achieve it. Well, Cherelle, not everybody comes from where you come from. So, what if my life story is not your life story? It doesn't have to be. Contribute the best way you can. And that's how Dr. King's work has helped to influence me. There are so many little girls and boys, listen, who should have, but do not have. And it's my responsibility as someone who benefited from people, particularly my teachers. I'm telling you, they put their hands on me to help people to turn their lives around. And so I want each of us to keep fighting for equity, keep building coalitions. Black people can't do it alone. Brown people can't do it alone. White people can't do it alone. Democrats can't do it alone. Republicans can't do it alone. It's when we recognize our humanity. Now, Cherelle, are you talking about pie in the sky, kumbaya? No. I'm talking about truth to power. We can all stay and walk in our own truth if we're respecting what we all bring to the table and saying to ourselves, ourselves, how can we, as authentically as we possibly can, contribute to make X, Y, and Z better? And when I look at the people who helped Dr. King, again, that picture, the Catholic priest and Rabbi Heschel and that diverse group marching in adversity, not when it was comfortable, not when the cameras were just flashing because they were giving a press conference, but when they could have gotten bottles thrown up beside their heads, they stood strong together. And it's that kind of humanity that sort of helps to drive me. And I think that's the greatest part of Dr. King's work that influences what I do on a daily basis. I'm a coalition builder, right? When I was in Harrisburg, I'm a proud Black woman Democrat from Philadelphia. No one expected Cherelle Parker to go to Harrisburg and to literally build relationships with Republicans. I mean, I still have people today, Will Dunbar, who'll say to me, well, wait a minute, a former Republican Speaker of the House just had his portrait unveiled in Harrisburg. He's an ultra conservative, Cherelle, but wait, he talked about you in his speech and the work that the two of you did while you were there, but you agreed to disagree with him 95% of the time. I remember you debating him on the floor of the House, but there were also times when we worked together, and that's what we have to get back to.
Excellent. There is a kind of, speaking of your work and legislation that you have worked on, recently we saw that City Council adopted a piece of your legislation to increase diversity hiring. How do you think we can leverage these practices and ideas to increase diversity across education? Obviously, in SCH, we're doing an amazing job under Dr. Druggin's leadership to increase our diversity efforts across all spectrums of our institution, but wanted to kind of give you the opportunity to respond in a larger context around education.
Well, again, you heard me mention that I am a formally trained educator. I understand the importance of students seeing teachers and education administrators who look like them or who have similar life experience. This also makes me think back to something that I said when during the last presidential election, where President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, when they were fortunate to be successful and win, probably a few months before that election, I had the great honor and privilege of literally hosting Kamala Harris, who was then a candidate for vice president, but I had an opportunity to host her literally at my house in the backyard. And as she is giving her presentation in the midst of our discussion, a reporter comes over while she's talking and says, "What are you thinking right now?" I immediately said, "You can't be what you don't see." So girls from all walks of life, from across the nation, boys with sisters, girl dads, to see her working hard to acquire the role and for them to see her successful, they now have that hope we talked about very early on and know that it is possible. It's the same with educators. In Philadelphia, we have organizations like one I can think of immediately. We have this Center for Black Educator Development, and they're working to train existing education staff, but to also try to build a pipeline of Black educators to serve our children. And we've got to find a way to support those organizations through actions and funding. Similar to other professions. I'm in the city of Philadelphia. We haven't done quite well with hiring Black and brown managers or directors. We have a lot of entry level city workers in our workforce, but the higher you go in the food chain, the diversity numbers get smaller and smaller and smaller. So I don't care if we're talking about public education, I don't care if we're talking about the medical profession, I don't care what profession you can think of. We have to find a way to ensure that diversity and inclusion is an essential part of it. And listen, not an afterthought, not a line, a sexy line on a website, but an action plan on how we can see it implemented. I look, for example, when I think about the teachers I had in my life, boy, oh boy, I could go from elementary school to middle. I went to Rowan Elementary Public School, Austin Meehan Middle School. I was bused to the Northeast, and I went to the Parkway Program High School in Center City. Those teachers who influenced my life, they were Black, they were white, they were Hispanic, they were women, they were men. All of this was under the leadership of the great Dr. Constance E. Clayton. But that diversity, it helped me. I'll give you a quick example of this. I have a deep love and profound respect for Black women's literature. When people find out that I love Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison and Ntozake Shange and Sonia Sanchez, and I mean, that literature is clearly like a part of my DNA, they immediately think that it was a Black teacher. It was not. It was my white high school English teacher, Jeanette Jimenez, who encouraged me after my grandmother died when I was 16 years old to write a speech about my life and enter the citywide Black History Month oratorical contest and the Women's History Month oratorical contest. And she told me I would use these books, to read these books, and these books would serve as my gird. They would be a part of my foundation, because these women, they had stories and life experiences that were similar to my own. And when I became the first student in the history of the school district of Philadelphia to win the Black History Month oratorical contest and the Women's History Month oratorical contest in the same year. And when people saw the picture, Steve Lopez wrote the articles on the front page of the Enquirer, I had people say, "You mean that white teacher?" I can remember it to the day. That white teacher is the one who got you engaged in Black women's literature and arts and culture. And I said, she absolutely did. And Jeanette Jimenez is like a mother to me today. So that's diversity and inclusion across all fields. But again, no matter who we are, we have something to offer.
Excellent. That's a fantastic story. And so as we look to wrap up our evening, our last question for you this evening, as we think of all the difficult issues that are plaguing our city, from our current pandemic to criminal justice issues, to education, thinking about Dr. King's legacy, what strategies could we employ from his teachings to help us with these issues in our cities and in communities, and how to address these issues?
Wow. Well, who came up with you all gave me the toughest questions you could come up with. So first and foremost, let me just say this. Let's be honest about his teachings and his evolution, because he grew from when he first got engaged in activism and being a pastor. We see his evolutions. Sometimes too many teachings, they try to simplify Dr. King's work and sort of romanticize his messages. He was not complacent. He was not naive. He was a man who wanted a better homeland for people, better leadership for America, and America as an international superpower. We should honor him by being honest about his legacy. For me, I would say, don't forget, he talked about civil rights because of what Jim Crow and segregation was doing to Black people. But remember, as his life and activism progressed, he talked about elevating the struggle from being one of civil rights to being one of human rights. And let's not forget that one of his last acts was his participation with the sanitation workers and marching with them about economic equity. about fair pay for fair work. So saying that those men and women, and this is where organized labor comes in, that they deserve to earn a living wage. Dr. Drugan knew exactly what he was talking about when he said those people in the community that he grew up in, they want to, the mills aren't there. The mills aren't there, just like, our factories closed here in the city of Philadelphia. Some of those good paying jobs that didn't require a college degree, but would allow people like me to become first generation college graduates in our family, they're not available. What will we do to help put people on a path to self-sufficiency so they are not dependent on government to take care of themselves? So that's what I would ask that we focus on the most. So the fight for fair, access, increasing, the minimum wage, a safer, cleaner, and more economically viable Commonwealth and city that has access to opportunity for all. And guess what? I wholeheartedly believe, based on the education that I have watched my son get from the time he started pre-K. I'm talking about from Miss Parker. I mean, that's my Stutzman. I'm thinking about Pizer. I'm thinking about Miles. I'm thinking about Ward. I'm thinking about Schreiber and Trulier and Engelman. And oh God, they're gonna kill me because I'm forgetting somebody. But everyone who has been a part of contributing to helping their minds grow. I mean, they're there with you all. Longer in many instances than they are with us, during the week. So all of these young minds, in the palm of your hands, what great power and influence. Use it and continue to use it. So, they come home asking questions, challenging us, saying why, them wondering, how can they even learn to employ the teachings? And I think we are doing that right now at SCH. I just encourage us to do what I encourage myself to do when times get rough, to just keep on keeping on. Thank you all so much for having me tonight. I hope I didn't put you all to sleep.
It was wonderful, Dr. Drugan.
Thank you, Councilwoman Parker. Always great to listen to your wisdom. You connected so many points for so many of us tonight. I hope we all remember to listen, to get to know each other deeper, and to work with people to find solutions. Don't think we know all the solutions and apply them to other people. Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Raina. Have a great night, everyone, and see you tomorrow.